Because you wake up each morning believing that if you just work harder, stay busy, stay patient, and keep doing what you're doing, life will eventually reward you. You believe time is on your side. You believe effort alone is noble. You believe motivation comes after clarity. Jim Rohn warned us about this illusion decades ago, and most people still didn't listen. They confuse movement with progress. They confuse hope with a plan. They confuse activity with achievement. And quietly, year after year, they trade their future for comfort. You don't drift into a great life, you drift into disaster. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never accept. Your goals are not meant to inspire you. They are meant to change you. If your goals don't force you to grow, they are decorative. If they don't demand discipline, they are fantasies. If they don't reshape your habits, your standards, and your identity, they are useless. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Jim Rohn used to say that life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. And change begins the moment you understand that goal setting is not about what you want. It's about who you must become to deserve it. History proves this over and over again. Every meaningful transformation, personal or social, began with a shift in standards. Civilizations didn't collapse because they lacked intelligence. They collapsed because they lowered expectations of themselves. Individuals don't fail because they lack potential. They fail because they tolerate lives that are beneath them. Goals exist to raise your tolerance for discipline and lower your tolerance for excuses. Most people set goals the way children make wishes, vague, emotional, temporary. They want more money, better health, confidence, freedom, but they never decide what kind of person earns those outcomes, and nature is brutal about this. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. A farmer doesn't pray for a harvest without planting. A sailor doesn't wish for wind without adjusting the sails. Yet people expect success without restructuring their daily behavior. Jim Rohn called this the law of sowing and reaping, and it doesn't care about your intentions. It only responds to action. But here's what most people miss. The seed is not the goal. The seed is the habit. Goals are not something you chase. They are something you align your life around. And that alignment begins with the first principle most people avoid because it threatens their identity. You must decide that average is no longer acceptable. Not average income, not average effort, not average thinking, not average discipline. Average is seductive. It feels safe. It feels socially approved. It feels invisible. And invisibility is comfortable. But average is where dreams go to die slowly. Jim Rohn used to say that you cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight. And direction is set by standards, not wishes. The moment you raise your standards, your life begins to resist you. Friends question you. Old habits fight back. Comfort argues its case. Your past tries to negotiate. That resistance is proof you're doing something right. But there is a deeper layer most people never see. Goals are not designed to be achieved quickly. They are designed to pull you forward while you struggle. The struggle is not a flaw in the process. The struggle is the process. Look at anyone who has built something meaningful: wealth, wisdom, influence, mastery. None of them had a straight path. They had a standard they refused to compromise. Jim Rohn didn't grow up wealthy. He grew up disciplined. He didn't start with confidence. He started with curiosity and accountability. He didn't win because life was fair. He won because he learned how to think. And thinking is where goal setting truly lives. If you don't know why you want a goal, you will abandon it at the first inconvenience. If you don't attach your goals to values, they dissolve under pressure. This is where most people fail silently. They set goals for outcomes, not for character. They want the reward without respecting the process. But here's the unsettling truth. The process is what qualifies you. Life is not asking what you want. It's asking what you are prepared to become. And this leads to the next principle, one that quietly separates leaders from followers. You must make your goals measurable enough to hold you accountable, but meaningful enough to hold your interest. Jim Rohn warned that vague goals produce vague results. I want to be successful is not a goal. It's an emotion. Emotions fade. structure lasts. When a goal is unclear, discipline becomes optional. When discipline is optional, excuses become logical. Clarity is not motivational. Clarity is confrontational. The moment you write down a precise goal, you expose the gap between who you are and who you must become. That gap creates discomfort. Most people run from that discomfort, but that discomfort is sacred. It's the birthplace of growth. Think of it this way. A goal is a mirror. It reflects your current habits back at you without mercy. If your goal requires skills you don't have, it exposes your ignorance. If your goal requires discipline you lack, it exposes your weakness. If your goal requires courage you've avoided, it exposes your fear. That exposure is not punishment, it's instruction, but there is a more dangerous truth underneath this. Most people secretly choose goals they already know how to achieve. Why? Because unfamiliar goals threaten the ego. Safe goals protect your self-image. Transformational goals challenge it. Jim Rohn taught that if you want a different life, you must become a different person. Not someday, starting now, starting today, starting with how you think, what you read, who you listen to, and what you tolerate. And tolerance is where change either begins or dies. You will never rise above the standards you accept. If you tolerate lateness, you tolerate chaos. If you tolerate excuses, you tolerate stagnation. If you tolerate distraction, you tolerate mediocrity. Goals are tools to eliminate tolerance for nonsense. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. You must accept full responsibility for your current results. Not blame, responsibility. Jim Rohn said it clearly. You cannot change the seasons, but you can change yourself. Blame is seductive. It protects the ego. Responsibility empowers the individual. The moment you accept responsibility, you regain control. Until then, you remain a victim of circumstances, opinions, and moods. Most people don't lack opportunity, they lack ownership. And ownership is heavy. It forces you to confront your habits, your choices, your inconsistencies. It removes the luxury of excuses, but ownership also unlocks freedom. Because if your choices created your current life, then new choices can create a new one. And this leads to a principle that almost no one practices consistently. You must attach your goals to daily disciplines, not distant outcomes. The future is built in invisible moments. Jim Rohn used to say that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is a few errors in judgment repeated daily. Notice the word daily, not occasionally, not when you feel inspired, not when life is convenient, daily. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is not. Your goals don't care how you feel today. They respond to what you do today. And here's the paradox. The days that feel insignificant are the days that matter most. The phone call you don't want to make, the book you don't feel like reading, the workout you want to skip, the conversation you avoid. These moments feel small, but compounded over time, they shape identity. And identity determines destiny. But there is a deeper layer here that most people overlook. Your goals must be designed to pull you out of your current environment. Environment is stronger than willpower. Jim Rohn famously said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, not because of motivation, but because of normalization. Your environment sets what feels normal. Your goals must disrupt that normal. If everyone around you settles, your ambition feels arrogant. If everyone around you complains, discipline feels extreme. If everyone around you avoids responsibility, accountability feels lonely. Goals isolate you before they elevate you. That loneliness is temporary, regret is permanent. But most people quit here, not because the goal is impossible, but because the emotional cost feels too high. They confuse discomfort with danger. Discomfort is not danger. It is growth signaling. Which brings us to another principle that quietly forces change. Your goals must demand skill acquisition. If your goal does not require you to learn, it will not change your life. Jim Rohn believed formal education makes a living, but self-education makes a fortune. And fortune is not just money, it's influence, wisdom, independence, control over time. Skills are the currency of value. You don't get paid for effort, you get paid for results. Results come from skills. Skills come from deliberate practice. Most people want the reward without the rehearsal, But mastery is boring before it's profitable. Reading when others scroll, practicing when others relax, failing publicly while others stay safe. Goals that force skill development feel frustrating early. That frustration is a sign of expansion. But there is a more subtle danger here. People often collect information without implementation. They attend seminars, watch videos, read books, but never apply. Jim Rohn warned that knowledge is only potential power. It becomes power through use. A goal without execution is intellectual entertainment, and entertainment is the enemy of transformation. So your goals must be tied to action so specific that excuses have nowhere to hide. Which brings us to a principle that most people resist because it demands patience. You must give your goals time to work on you. Everyone wants fast results. Few are willing to endure slow growth. But growth is always invisible before it is undeniable. Seeds grow underground before they break the surface. Muscles tear before they strengthen. Character forms in silence before it's recognized. Jim Rohn taught that time is more valuable than money, but only if used wisely. If you quit too early, you interrupt the process. If you persist long enough, the process reshapes you. But here's the danger. Impatience often disguises itself as practicality. People say this isn't working when what they mean is this is uncomfortable. Comfort is expensive. It costs you the future, which leads to the final principle, the one that ties everything together. You must review your goals regularly, not to adjust the dream, but to adjust yourself. Goals are not fixed because life changes, but the purpose remains. Jim Rohn used to review his goals daily, not because he forgot them, but because repetition reinforces identity. When you revisit your goals, you remind yourself who you are becoming. You recalibrate your standards. You correct drift. Drift is subtle. No one plans to fail. They simply stop paying attention. Daily review sharpens focus. Weekly reflection builds awareness. Monthly evaluation restores alignment, and alignment is power. When your goals, habits, values, and environment align, progress accelerates. But here's the truth that almost no one tells you. Your goals will eventually demand a version of you that your current self cannot sustain. That is the moment of decision. You can either upgrade your identity or abandon the goal. Most people abandon the goal and protect their ego. Few abandon the ego and transform their life. Jim Rohn chose the second path, and that choice changed everything. And now the question returns to you. Not tomorrow, not next year, now. What are your goals demanding of you that you've been avoiding? What habits must die for your future to live? What standards must rise for your life to change? Because the same thinking that created your current life cannot create the next one. And that brings us full circle. You don't have a goal problem. You have a thinking problem. Change your thinking, raise your standards, set goals that force you to grow. Because if you don't design your future, someone else will, and they will design it small. And just like the beginning, the ending is simple and dangerous. You don't drift into a great life, you drift into disaster. Jim Rohn warned about this phase, though most people never recognize it. He said that after inspiration fades, discipline must take over, and discipline is quiet. Discipline doesn't cheer, discipline doesn't motivate. Discipline simply asks one question every day. Will you do what you said you would do? This is where goals stop being exciting and start being revealing. Your calendar exposes your priorities. Your habits expose your values. Your excuses expose your character. Most people don't fail loudly. They fade quietly. They miss one day, then two, then a week. Then they redefine the goal so they don't have to confront themselves. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The world is not neutral toward your goals. Once you decide to grow, you begin to threaten systems that rely on you staying the same. Friends who benefit from your predictability. Industries built on your distraction. Social circles bonded by shared complaints. Jim Rohn understood this well. He said that if you change, everything will change for you. And not everyone will celebrate that. Some people will mock your discipline because it highlights their lack of it. Some will downplay your ambition because it challenges their comfort. Some will call you different, as if that's an insult. but different is the price of destiny. Goals that force you to change will also force you to choose. Choose between approval and progress, between comfort and character, between fitting in and standing out. And here's the uncomfortable part. You cannot carry everyone with you. Growth requires separation before it brings association. Jim Rohn called this the law of attraction. You don't chase better people. You become better and they find you. But before that happens, there is loneliness. Loneliness is not emptiness, it's transition. And most people turn back here, not because they lack ability, but because they fear isolation. But think about this carefully. What is more painful? Temporary loneliness or permanent regret? The people you admire most were misunderstood first. The ideas that changed the world were mocked first. The disciplines that create freedom always look extreme to those trapped by routine, which brings us to another reality of goal setting no one prepares you for. Your goals will expose your weaknesses before they build your strengths. Impatience will surface. Procrastination will argue. Self-doubt will whisper. Old habits will beg for survival. This is not failure. This is excavation. Jim Rohn said that personal development is not a seminar. It's a lifelong process. And that process begins by seeing yourself clearly. You cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. Goals act like pressure, and pressure reveals structure. When pressure reveals cracks, most people quit. But the whys reinforce. They don't ask, why is this so hard? They ask, what is this trying to teach me? Every obstacle carries instruction. If consistency is hard, your systems are weak. If focus is hard, your environment is noisy. If discipline is hard, your standards are unclear. Goals don't punish you for flaws, they point them out. And that leads to a principle Jim Rohn lived by, though few apply it consistently. You must work harder on yourself than you do on your goals. Most people reverse this. They chase results while neglecting growth. But results are lagging indicators. Character is the engine. When you grow, your goals feel lighter. When you stagnate, even small goals feel heavy. Jim Rohn invested hours every day reading, reflecting, refining his thinking, not because it felt productive, but because it was foundational. Success is built on invisible preparation, the conversations you have with yourself, the standards you enforce when no one is watching, the decisions you make when shortcuts are available. And here's the part most people resist. You must become the kind of person who keeps promises to yourself. Self-trust is currency. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken it. Every time you keep one, you strengthen it. Goals are not just targets, they are contracts, and broken contracts destroy confidence. This is why small daily wins matter more than dramatic bursts of effort. Consistency builds identity. Identity drives behavior. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, which brings us to another uncomfortable reality. Your goals must eventually conflict with your old identity. The version of you that procrastinates cannot coexist with the version that executes. The version that avoids responsibility cannot coexist with the version that leads. One must die. Jim Rohn said that for things to change, you must change. Not hope, not wish. Change. That means letting go of stories you've told yourself for years. I'm just not disciplined. I've always been like this. I work better under pressure. Those are not truths. They are habits of thought. And habits can be replaced, but replacement requires repetition. You don't change your life with one decision. You change it with thousands of aligned decisions made boringly, consistently, relentlessly. And here's the paradox. The more disciplined you become, the more freedom you experience. Discipline feels restrictive at first, but chaos is the real prison. Jim Rohn said, discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. Every skipped habit adds weight. Every avoided decision compounds cost. But every disciplined act buys future freedom, which leads to a truth few people want to hear. You are always paying a price. You either pay the price of discipline now or the price of regret later. And regret always charges interest. Goals force you to choose which price you're willing to pay. Now let's talk about time, the silent judge of all goals. Time does not speed up for ambition. It does not slow down for excuses. It simply records. Jim Rohn taught that days are expensive. When you spend a day, you have one less to spend. Most people live as if time is abundant. It is not. The urgency of your goals should not create anxiety, but it should create focus. Urgency is not panic. Urgency is respect. Respect for the fact that wasted time is irretrievable. Respect for the fact that potential unused becomes regret remembered. But here's where most people misunderstand urgency. They rush outcomes instead of refining process. Jim Rohn never rushed growth. He trusted the process while demanding consistency. He knew that overnight success is always preceded by long-term preparation, and that preparation is often boring, which is why goals must be emotionally meaningful, not just logically appealing. If your goals don't move you emotionally, discipline will collapse under pressure. Emotion fuels endurance, but emotion alone is unstable. That's why goals must also be rooted in values. Values anchor you when motivation fades. Ask yourself this honestly. Why does this goal matter? Who does it serve beyond you? What kind of person does it require you to become? If your answers are shallow, your commitment will be fragile. Jim Rohn believed that the strongest goals are connected to contribution. When your growth benefits others, your resilience multiplies. Selfish goals exhaust you. Purposeful goals sustain you. And now we reach a truth that separates dreamers from builders. Your goals must include personal responsibility and personal forgiveness. Responsibility keeps you accountable. Forgiveness keeps you moving. You will miss days. You will stumble. You will fall short. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. What matters is speed of recovery. Do you quit after a mistake, or do you recommit? Most people use failure as evidence they should stop. The wise use it as feedback to adjust. Jim Rohn never saw failure as identity, only as information. And information, when used, becomes wisdom, which brings us back to the core truth. Goals are not about achievement, they are about alignment. Alignment between who you are today and who you are becoming. When alignment is strong, progress is inevitable. When alignment is weak, effort is wasted. And alignment requires constant attention. Because drift never announces itself. You don't wake up one day off course. You drift there quietly. That's why review is power, reflection is correction. And now, as this message draws toward its end, the question becomes unavoidable. If nothing changes, where will your current habits take you? 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Same routines, same thinking, same tolerance. Jim Rohn said we must all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. The choice is yours, but the cost is unavoidable. And now we return to where we began. You don't have a goal problem, you have a thinking problem. And until you change how you think, every goal you set will quietly fail. But if you change your thinking, if you raise your standards, if you commit to goals that force you to grow, then life has no choice but to change with you. Because you don't drift into a great life, you drift into disaster. And the moment you decide to stop drifting is the moment everything begins.